What if I told you that the most popular performance compound of the last 30 years, the one whispered about in locker rooms and prescribed by anti-aging clinics for thousands of dollars a month, might actually be the wrong tool for most people? Synthetic growth hormone has a reputation that borders on mythical, but there's a quieter compound, one that works with your body instead of overriding it, that a lot of researchers and clinicians now consider the smarter approach. Today, we're talking about Sermorelin and why it might just beat straight HGH at its own game. Before we get into it, a quick note. Everything here is educational. We're exploring the science of how these compounds work, not telling you to go acquire or use anything. Talk to a qualified medical professional before making any decisions about your health. With that out of the way, let's get into the biology. Let's start with understanding what's actually happening inside your body, because this is where the whole argument lives. Your growth hormone isn't just floating around at a constant level. It's released by your pituitary gland in pulses, mostly at night during deep sleep, and in smaller bursts throughout the day. This pulsatile rhythm matters enormously. Your body evolved to respond to those waves, not to a flat, constant flood of the hormone. Now here's the key difference. When someone injects synthetic HGH, they're introducing the finished hormone directly into the bloodstream. It bypasses your pituitary gland entirely. Your brain isn't deciding how much to release or when. You're essentially overriding the body's own command center and force-feeding it a hormone at levels and timing your own system would never naturally produce. Sermorelin works completely differently. It's what's called a growth hormone-releasing hormone analog. To put that simply, Sermorelin is a signal, not the hormone itself. It travels to your pituitary gland and tells it, hey, it's time to make and release some growth hormone. Your own gland does the work, your own body decides the amount, releases it in those natural pulses, and crucially, your built-in safety mechanisms stay intact. That last point is bigger than it sounds. Your body has a feedback loop involving a hormone called somatostatin that acts like a brake on growth hormone production. When levels get high enough, somatostatin kicks in and says enough. With Sermorelin, that brake still functions. You physiologically cannot overdose your way into dangerously high growth hormone levels the way you can by injecting the synthetic hormone directly, because your own regulatory system is still in charge. That's a fundamentally safer design, and it's the core of why so many people in this space have shifted their thinking. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the safety profile is only half the story. Let's talk about side effects and what actually happens long-term. One of the biggest concerns with exogenous HGH, meaning growth hormone you inject from outside the body, is something called pituitary suppression or desensitization. When you constantly supply the finished hormone, your own pituitary gland can essentially get the message that it doesn't need to bother producing growth hormone anymore. Why would it work if the supply is already there? Over time, this can lead to a sluggish or downregulated natural production. People can become dependent on the external source. Sermorelin does the opposite. Because it stimulates your pituitary to keep working, it can actually help maintain and, in some cases, support the gland's natural function. You're exercising the system rather than replacing it. Think of the difference between using a wheelchair and doing physical therapy. One does the work for you and your muscles atrophy. The other keeps you engaged and functioning. Then there are the classic side effects associated with high doses of synthetic growth hormone. Because you're often pushing levels beyond what the body would naturally produce, you see issues like water retention, joint pain, carpal tunnel syndrome from swelling that compresses nerves, and insulin resistance, which is a serious concern for blood sugar regulation. There's also the well-documented risk that excess growth hormone can promote the growth of tissues you don't want growing, which is why this is never something to approach casually. With Sermorelin, because the release stays within physiological limits, those side effects tend to be milder and far less common. You're not flooding the system, you're nudging it. The most commonly reported issues are minor, things like redness or irritation at the injection site, occasional flushing, or temporary lightheadedness. The body simply doesn't experience the same dramatic overshoot. There's also a fascinating wrinkle here regarding insulin-like growth factor 1, often called IGF-1. This is one of the main downstream markers that growth hormone affects, and it's responsible for a lot of growth hormone's actual benefits. Direct HGH injection tends to spike IGF-1 sharply. Sermorelin produces a more gradual, more controlled rise. For many researchers, that smoother curve is exactly what you want because the sudden spikes are part of what's associated with the less desirable effects. So let's bring this together and talk about who this actually matters for and what the realistic expectations are, because I don't want to oversell anything here. Sermorelin is not a magic shortcut, and anyone telling you it'll transform you overnight is selling you something. Because it works through your own physiology, the effects tend to come on more gradually. People exploring it in research and clinical settings often report the early benefits showing up in sleep quality first. That makes biological sense, because the biggest natural growth hormone pulse happens during deep sleep, and Sermorelin tends to enhance that nighttime release. Better deep sleep cascades into everything else: recovery, mood, cognitive sharpness. From there, the commonly discussed benefits over the following weeks and months include improved body composition, meaning gradual changes in the ratio of muscle to fat, better recovery from training, improvements in skin quality and elasticity, and a general uptick in energy and well-being. These are the kinds of effects you'd expect from restoring more youthful growth hormone signaling rather than blasting the system. The important framing is this: Sermorelin tends to be most relevant for people whose natural growth hormone production has declined, which happens to all of us with age. It's about optimization and restoration toward a healthy baseline, not about pushing the body into supraphysiological territory for dramatic performance gains. If someone's goal is the extreme rapid muscle gain that bodybuilding circles associate with high-dose synthetic growth hormone, Sermorelin is simply a different tool with a different philosophy. It trades raw intensity for safety, sustainability, and working with the body's own intelligence. And that's really the whole thesis. Synthetic HGH is a sledgehammer. It's powerful, but it's blunt. It overrides your natural regulation. It carries a heavier side effect burden, and it can suppress your own production over time. Sermorelin is more like a tuning fork. It nudges your body to do what it already knows how to do, within its own safe limits, on its own natural schedule. For the majority of people whose real goal is sustainable optimization rather than maximum extreme output, that gentler, smarter approach genuinely does beat raw HGH on the metrics that matter most for long-term health. Of course, none of this exists in a vacuum. Both of these compounds sit in complex regulatory and medical categories, and the quality, sourcing, and legality vary enormously depending on where you are. This is exactly why the conversation with a knowledgeable medical professional isn't optional. It's the entire foundation of doing this responsibly. If you found this breakdown useful and you want to go deeper, I've put together a collection of the key research papers, studies, and resources we referenced today down in the description. That's where you'll find the actual science to read for yourself, because I always want you making decisions based on evidence, not hype. While you're down there, if this is the kind of no-nonsense, research-first content you want more of, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We've got some deep dives on peptide stacks and natural hormone optimization on the way that you won't want to miss. Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep optimizing.